Hi, this is Amy from Noble Character Crafts, and today I am going to be showing you a tutorial on how I make my Hexi Scrappy Blanket. This is not a published pattern, it's just one of my own patterns that I came up with, and I will be linking in the description box the exact details of how the pattern that I'm following for this blanket, but I thought it would be fun and helpful for any of you that would like to make a similar scrappy blanket to be able to follow along with this tutorial to see how I am making my scrappy Hexi blanket. So this blanket is made up of, it's entirely made up of fingering weight yarn using the smallest little tidbits of yarn. Here is my little collection of some of the fingering weight scraps that I have on hand. And as you can see, many of these little tiny nuggets are super, super tiny. They probably weigh less than 1 gram, but they are still able to be used as part of this scrappy blanket. So I am using a C hook, which is 2.75 millimeter. This one is a Clover brand, which I really love. And I have grabbed a few of my scraps that I think look great together. Here are the 3 that I'm going to be using in today's tutorial. As you can see, this one is super tiny, but you know, a few of them are larger, but you really don't need very much yarn for any one of the rounds of the hexagon. So the way that I start off with this pattern is I start with a slip knot. And I chain 4. Then I work 11 double crochets, these are US terms, in the 4th chain from the hook. So the very first chain that you made. So if you just start off at that very first chain that you made, and work 11 double crochets into that chain. That first chain of 4 will act as your first double crochet, so there will be a total of 12 double crochets essentially. Okay, I now have worked 12 or 11 more double crochets into that 4th chain, and I always like to double check and count around to make sure that I have 12 spokes total, I guess, around this little wheel, you can think of it. I like to give this starting tail, you know, this extra little tail that's hanging off here, an extra pull at that point, because I really like it when my center has a very tight, you know, I don't like it when there's a gaping hole in the middle, so I really like to tighten that up, and that giving that an extra little pull at this point is really helpful. And the next step is to do a slip stitch into the 3rd chain. So the top of this, now this is acting as a chain 3 because that 4th chain is kind of hidden into the center. So anyway, in the top of this chain, this first chain, you count 1, 2, 3, and you do a slip stitch into this top stitch, which can be a little bit fiddly, but just try to work it so that you have 2 strands of yarn on the top of your hook here. And I like to also crochet over this tail now to hide that so I don't have to weave it in. So I work it just like this. The next step is to do a slip stitch into this next space between these 2 spokes. So you've just done a slip stitch into this top chain, and now there's a little space in between the 2 spokes, and you're going to put your hook into that space and do another slip stitch. Chain 2. This first stitch on this second round is a little bit different than the rest. The way that the first stitch works, after you chain 2, you yarn over, insert your hook into that same space, yarn over, pull through that space, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Then chain 1. The rest of this round will be what I call a double crochet 2 together. So you're double crocheting 2 stitches together. So you yarn over, insert your hook into the next space between the next 2 spokes of the previous round, yarn over, pull through that space, yarn over, pull through 2, and then you're going to do that again. Yarn over, insert into that space, yarn over, pull through the space, yarn over, pull through 2 loops again. Now you have 3 loops remaining on your hook, yarn over and pull through all 3 on your hook, and then chain 1. I'll do that one more time, but that's the stitch we'll be doing for this round all the way around. Yarn over, insert into that space, the next space between the next 2 spokes from the previous round, yarn over, pull through that space, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on your hook only. Yarn over into that space, yarn over through the space, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops remaining on your hook. Chain 1. Do that for the entirety of this round, and I'll meet you back here when we're done with that. As you can see, as I'm going around this round, I am always just crocheting right over that tail end so that I don't have to worry about weaving it in the end. Okay, I have done a total of 12 of those double crochet 2 together stitches followed by a chain 1 in between each stitch. Again, I like to just double check, make sure I have 12 all the way around before I do my last slip stitch for this round, which is going to be placed in the top of that first double crochet 2 together. So right here in this stitch. Again, this is always kind of a fiddly step to try to insert your hook in there, but again, you want to have 2 threads of the yarn on top of the crochet hook. Slip stitch that together there to join. And then you can go ahead and cut your yarn and pull it through. So that's the first round done. Now I only have this tiny little nugget left, but I'm going to save it because for the second round, or I'm sorry, the third round that I will be showing you next, it takes the least amount of yarn, and I think that this is enough to do that third round on a different hexie down the road. So now you'll grab your second color for the third round. I like to start my third round a couple of stitches away from the last joining section of my previous round, and you will join in one of the chain 1 spaces from the previous round. I like to insert my hook. I like to grab my yarn so that it is just looped over my hook and pull it through, and to secure it I chain 1 with both of those ends together like that. So you can see I have the tail end and the working yarn, and I did that first chain with both of them, and that secures the end pretty well. Then I drop that little tail and I do another 2 chains for this round, so a total of 3 chains. And now I'm going to work another 2 double crochet stitches into that same chain space. And again, I am working over that tail so I don't have to worry about weaving it in the end. Now this is the easiest round, I think. You are just going to be working 3 double crochets into each chain 1 space all the way around. On this next stitch, I'm going to be coming to the first tail from the first 2 rounds. And again, of course, I'm going to be crocheting right over that tail as well. All right, I have now worked 12 of those 3 double crochet clusters all the way around. And now I will do another slip stitch into the top of the first chain 3. So again, like we did on that first round, I count 1, 2, 3 and do a slip stitch into the top of that chain with 2 of the threads of yarn over the crochet hook and slip stitch to join that round. Cut the yarn and pull the tail through. Again, I'll be saving this little nugget as well. Now for the final round, and when you are starting off this Hexi blanket, you will just complete this 4th round all the way around. But I like to join my hexes as I go, and so I'm going to be showing you that method. So typically how I'm going to be joining as I'm going around, I like to work all the way around the circumference of my blanket as I'm working on it. So I'm going to be joining my new hexie right here in this section. And so I will be joining along this side, and this side. So it will be 3 sides of my hexagon will be joined as I crochet along. The way that I like to start this round is from the joining round of the joining spot of the previous round. I like to skip over 2 sets of these double crochet clusters. So there's 1 set of 3. Here's the 2nd set. And you want to start this 4th round on the furthest right stitch of one of those clusters of 3 from the previous round. So I'm going to be inserting my hook into this stitch, which is the furthest right, the rightmost stitch from one of the clusters of the previous round. I'll be joining it just like I did before, inserting my hook, doubling over the yarn in my hand like this, pulling it through, and then doing 1 chain to secure that tail. I let the tail drop down and I do another 2 chains. So I have a set of 3 chains to start. Now I'm going to be working into the top of each of the stitches from the previous round for this round. I'm going to do another double crochet into the top of the next stitch, and again into the next stitch, a double crochet stitch. So now I have 3 double crochet stitches in the top of each of the stitches from the previous round. In the next set of 3 clusters, I'm going to start off with 2 double crochets in the first stitch. This is going to be one of my corners of my hexie. The next stitch is going to be double crochet, chain 2, double crochet into 1 stitch. Again, you're going to be doing a double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, but I am also going to be joining to this hexagon as I work this. So the way that I do that is I do a double crochet into the next stitch. I only chain 1, and then I'm going to start joining to this next hexie. So you can see that this is the corner, one of the corner spaces from this hexie. There is a space here because I did a chain 2 stitch. So there's a little bit of a space here that you can see. I'm going to be inserting my hook into that space and making a slip stitch into that space. And that slip stitch is also going to count as my 2nd chain for this corner stitch. Then I'll be working another double crochet into that same stitch. After I complete each stitch, I'm going to be inserting my hook into the next space between the stitches from the hexagon that I am attaching to. So I'm going to be going over this little post right here and into the next space between posts, and another slip stitch. And that's how I'm going to be joining my hexies together along the edges here. The next stitch is going to be another 2 double crochet into the same stitch of this next stitch. But again, I'm going to be attaching with a slip stitch to the joining hexie in between each double crochet. So there's 1 double crochet, I'm going to be going over the next post, inserting my hook into that space and making a slip stitch again, and then doing another double crochet into that same stitch again. And again, after I complete that double crochet, insert into the next space between the posts on this attaching hexie. I am going to be repeating this pattern around this hexie. So the pattern is double crochet into the next 3 stitches, and that is for one whole cluster from the previous round. You're going to be doing a double crochet into each of those stitches for a total of 3. And then the next cluster of 3 from the previous round, you're going to be doing a corner section, which includes 2 double crochet into the first stitch, 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 double crochet into the next stitch, and 2 double crochet again into the third stitch from that previous round's cluster. Again, you can refer to the notes in the description box below for the details of the pattern. Okay, I am now to the point where I am at the joining section from the previous round, and this little section can be a little bit trickier just because it's a little bit different to find the stitches from the previous round where you should be inserting your hook. But I like to insert my hook into the space where I made my slip stitch from the previous round. And now I am at the point where I'm going to have 2 tails that I am going to be crocheting over at once, but I just like to tuck them under here and work right over top of them. Now I'm going to be doing a double crochet into the next stitch. And instead of chaining 2, I'm going to be doing a joining slip stitch into the next 2 corner spaces. Here is the first one right here is the first space that I'm going to be doing a slip stitch in to join, and that counts as my first chain. And now I'm going to be joining into the next hexie, which is right here. And here you can see the space that I'm going to be joining into, which again is a little bit of a bigger hole because of the chain 2 on that corner. And look, I've now got another tail of yarn that I want to work over from this hexie so that I can hide it as well. This I do find a little bit fiddly to make sure that this little tail stays where it belongs, which is with that hexie, but it's manageable, and I have gotten really used to just pulling it back. It likes to kind of flip over into the way, but I just keep it up there with that hexie. And then I'm going to be continuing to join into this hexie as I work along. All right, I am now to the second corner where I'm going to be joining. So again, I've already done my 1 double crochet into that center stitch. I'm going to be doing 2 slip stitches into the next 2 corner stitches on the connecting hexagons. After I do that slip stitch and crochet over this little tail from this hexagon here, I let that little tail fall behind my work, and I'm going to clip that off when I'm done with this hexie. And then I'm going to be starting into this blue hexie. Here is the corner stitch that I'm going to be working into. Now I have this tail from this blue hexie that I'm joining to. Again, of course, I'm just working right over that as well. Okay, I'm to my last corner where I'm going to be joining with a slip stitch into that corner stitch. And to finish off my chain 2 for the corner, I am just going to be chaining 1. And then I will continue with the pattern until I get to the end of this round. So I'm going to be doing a double crochet to finish off that corner, and then another 2 double crochets into the next stitch. And finish off the round with the same pattern repeated to the end. All right, I have finished this round, and again I will be doing a slip stitch into the top of the first chain 3 to join that round. Cut that one off, pull it through, and the very last step is just to cut off the little tail that's left on the back side of the work. So this is that little tail that we left hanging, and you can just go ahead and snip that off. And as you can see, even the back of the work is nice and neat because we've crocheted over all of those ends. So the only little ends that are left are the ones along the edge that you will be crocheting over as you join in more hexies. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial and that it was helpful in case you would like to make your own scrappy hexi blanket. I would love to see any of the projects that you are working on using my tutorial and my pattern that I've come up with. If you do, please don't hesitate to let me know by tagging me on Instagram at Noble Character Crafts or messaging me at my email at noblecharactercrafts@yahoo.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. Bye-bye.